When someone says the word poverty to you, you most likely think of the continent Africa, due to the vast amount of hungry and disadvantaged people it supports. This is true, however not many people realise that Africa only makes up 276 million of the 925 million people living in poverty around the world. Another 19 million people of these come from developed countries, and another 37 million come from Latin America and the Caribbean. The remaining 578 million derive from Asia and the Pacific, with India dominating the continent and the world, with a staggering 400 million people living in poverty. In case you're wondering, the global measure for poverty is when someone is living off less than $1.25 a day. In Australia, $1.25 will get you a chocolate bar, let alone a day's worth of food. In India, 32.7% of the population fall below the poverty line, 2/3 of the people scraping by with less than $2 a day. Poverty in India is divided up into two sections, rural and urban. So what is urban poverty? Well, urban poverty is when poverty takes place in an urban environment, such as a city or large town, basically somewhere populated and built up. Urban poverty in India has taken place in form of a slum. A slum is an overcrowded, poorly put together mass of tiny houses, where rubbish, human and animal waste fills the narrow and badly paved streets. The jobs you get in here are the lowest paid, and some of the most time-consuming around. There are thousands of these jobs within a slum, including hand embroidery, heavy stonework, and even a wallet-making leather industry, which alone employs over 40,000 people, including children. Due to the quality of the jobs, many families will only have one family member who works to pay their living. This is why nearly all families in a slum can only afford 1 or 2 rooms to live in. Due to these factors, a whole household living off less than $5 a day is not unusual in the slums. Out in the open, clothes are washed by hand in alleyways. There is no official or clean hospital, and even if there was, no one would be able to afford it. To make matters worse, clean drinking water is hard to access easily, as only 25% of households in India have clean water on their premises. If you fall ill, it is life-threatening for yourself and family, as infection is rife with the waste and filth around. The largest and most recognised slum in India is Dhabi, Mumbai. In it, the people are so deep down in poverty. Some people are even seen brushing teeth with twigs in the desperation of preventing their teeth from rotting and falling out. Dhabi may only be 1 square kilometre, but it supports more than 1 million people within it. Rural poverty is very dissimilar to urban because it takes place in the countryside and in farming land. These areas are nowhere near as populated per square kilometre. Instead, people are spread out and nearly completely isolate to police and other forms of enforcement. People out here make their living by mostly growing crops and selling livestock. Farmers out here have to rely entirely on rain patterns and monsoons for their crops to grow sufficiently enough for them to make a living. If weather patterns are poor, farmers are at great risk of crops dying or suffering inadequate growth. A drought bringing poverty to millions of people living in rural areas. This is how rural poverty has grown in India, and why many lives are at risk. Due to it being out in the countryside, diseases such as cholera, malaria, and typhoid outbreaks are frequent, and with no immunizations or treatment, deaths follow. Due to these conditions, many children and families move to more populated areas in search for work and money to survive. By looking at both rural and urban poverty in India, we can see that it is an evident problem throughout. So how did it get to be this way? Again, there are different reasons for the poverty in rural and urban areas. Throughout the rural parts of India, poverty has been ever present for thousands of years due to a part of the Hindu religion, India's main religion, called the caste system. The caste system determines what one's occupation can be and the social interactions that they can have. It channels people into 4 official groups, or castes, each of which are still strong today. These are the Brahmin, who engage in scriptural, education and teaching; the Kshatriya, who work in all forms of public service. In ancient India, these were the warriors; the Vaishya, who work in commercial business lines; and the Shudra, who work as a semi or unskilled labourer. Unfortunately, there is a 5th group, who have no caste, called the Untouchables, who are forced into poverty due to who they are. Fortunately, in 1950, the Indian Constitution made it so that the discrimination of someone based on their caste was illegal and the practice of untouchability banned. Furthermore, in 1976, they took a step further towards abolishing untouchability by starting mandatory enforcement towards eradicating the case. However, despite the work towards eliminating untouchability from the castes, it is commonly practiced in these rural areas. This is due to the weak amount of enforcement that can be carried out in these vast areas. In urban areas, this system is easily enforced and not a factor for the poverty in urban areas. A main difficulty throughout these communities, however, is the lack of education and training available, therefore limiting the quantity of the jobs they can pursue. The slow job growth is also putting and keeping many held in poverty. An interesting component of the situation is a system that was put in place to lessen poverty, yet has backfired and is now giving help to profitable retail businesses, not those who depend on it. It is called the Public Distribution System, or PDS, which is supposed to give people food and other essential items to people in poverty. The individual is entitled to a below poverty line card, or BPL card, which they present to a fair price shop, or FPS, who should provide them with a monthly amount of supplies. Unfortunately, the BPL cards are often forged by middlemen and shop owners to use for their own needs. Sadly, the dealers who give out the supplies have now turned to corruption, replacing the stock that they were given with an inferior amount and product. After seeing again the 2 sides of poverty in India and how they have come to be, we know that it is a growing issue throughout. Now that we know the cause of the problem, we now must inquire into a way that we can take action and solve this issue. However, can anything be done? And if so, what is it? There are many ways to help lessen poverty. However, many people are unaware of them. The most commonly known method is in form of a charity, a non-profit organisation that helps those in need. Charity is an essential component in this process, as they allow people to get back on their feet so they can start getting out of poverty. Charities supply them with food, water, money, and other essentials for them to live. However, charities are only the starting component in the steps taken to rise out from poverty. To get out of it completely, you need to be able to be self-sufficient and not to rely on other people to fund your living. This is where the next component comes in, something that has only come about in the last 30 years, called microfinance. Microfinance is the supply of loans or microcredit, savings accounts, and insurance for the poor. The reason why this is so essential is because normal banks will not serve people with such low incomes. Microfinance is just like a normal bank, with everything involving smaller amounts of money. This allows people in poverty to take out loans of a few $100s at a time, with less than an 11% interest rate on it. By having savings accounts and insurance, they are protected from the risk of bad weather or illness, which would otherwise leave them without their business or normal income. A non-profit organisation called Kiva allows ordinary people like you or me to partially fund a loan for an individual or group running a small business around the world. Over 100 people can put in as little as $25 to fully fund a loan. Once the person has repaid the loan, you get your money back, which you can either withdraw or use to fund another loan. Unfortunately, charities and microfinance are only part of the solution. Ordinary people can only do so much towards lessening and ending poverty. Yes, you can still make a significant difference, yet the people who have the largest responsibility are the government of India itself. They have the capability to fund invaluable assets such as education, training, hospitals, and much more. It all starts with awareness to individuals, organisations, and governments across the world. Once people are aware, they can start taking action and resolving the problem. Little things make an immense difference if the majority of the people do it. Organisations like Kiva and World Vision are all out there. It's just a matter of opening your eyes and making a difference.